So, Kareem, once again, there's an incident where some Sacramento police killed an unarmed black man. It's on the news and on social media.
When happened today?
Happened on Sunday, according to the article I read. It happened Sunday, and he was in his backyard of his grandmother's house. I guess he stayed there too. And officers came up on the scene and claimed that they thought he had a gun. Turned out to be his cell phone. But at the end of the day, he's dead. Another black man dead by the hands of the police. When is this stuff gonna stop? What's their argument?
Shit, I didn't get a chance to see this article or read about it, but a couple of questions, since you already know about it, a couple of questions I have to ask is, why were the police in his backyard? Do you know that?
The article said, and there was a helicopter involved too. So
if there's a helicopter involved, I'm led to believe that there was a chase of some sort, or they were looking for someone.
So the article says that yes, somebody reported a man breaking into cars or breaking or shattered a window or something to that effect.
Okay.
And the helicopter has the video of the man in the backyard.
Okay.
Or something like that.
So with that information, then that makes me believe that he was a possible suspect in this breaking windows situation that caused the officers to come on scene.
Right. I'm not saying that they were there for a legitimate reason.
All right. And so the officers come upon this man. How did they know he was in the backyard? Or how did that...
Well, I guess through the communications that they have. Between the helicopter, viewing down on him, the helicopter is part of the police department, right? Mm-hmm. So they're communicating, right?
Okay. And so the helicopter's, okay, if that's the case, then the helicopter's tipped off the officers where this suspect is. And was this daytime? Was this nighttime? It was
nighttime.
Nighttime.
9:18
p.m. So that changes the complexity of it, right? Because at nighttime, it's dark. It's a black male, depending upon what he had on and all that jazz, his mannerisms, his behaviors, his compliance level, that will determine how typically most officers take action. So you're saying that he was an unarmed black man was shot. What did the article say about moments before shots were fired? Was he concealing his hands? Was he running? Was he trying to evade arrest? Was he non-compliant with officers' commands?
Well, there's a body camera video. I didn't see the body cam video, but according to the article, it said that as soon as the officers came up on the scene, hey, stop, show me your hands, and then pow pow.
And then pow pow? Mm-hmm. So an unarmed black man gets shot again. You said again. Yeah, that's typical, but the thing about it is white unarmed people are getting shot too. Think about the guy that got shot in the hotel lobby or the hotel hallway. Officers were there justifiably on the scene because somebody was shooting outside of a window a gun.
You talking about the guy who was crawling in the hallway?
In the hallway.
Okay, that was stupid too.
But no, what I'm saying to you is that the media, I'm talking about how the media frames these titles of these articles. Mm-hmm. Another unarmed black man gets shot. Unarmed white men are being shot too, is what I'm saying. It's not about the race issue. I don't think it's about the race as much as it is about the training officers receive in circumstances like this. And I'll explain. So, you started the camera with an emotional arousal about another unarmed black man being shot. I don't know if you remember this situation. I'm about to cuss. I don't know if you remember this situation when this officer down in South Carolina approached that black dude and was telling him to get his hands out of his pocket, and the black dude pulled out a gun and shot the officer point blank, damn near killed him. Mm-hmm. Okay? We don't talk much about that individual who attempted to take that officer's life, right? In a situation where the officer doesn't know if he's armed or not, the guy pulls out a gun, hand in his pocket, pulls out a gun and attempts to kill the officer. So here's the thing. BLET, basic law enforcement training, at least the one that I went to. You know, what other people do in other jurisdictions, I don't have a clue, but it's pretty standard. The goal of the day is for the officer to go home the same way he came in to damn work. Now, here's the training. The training doesn't train officers to identify culture, race, or any of that jazz. It's always going to be about behaviors. So, as a police officer, when I come on the scene, I want to regain control over an uncontrollable situation. Typically, we get called because some shit is out of control. We want to regain control. Keep everybody safe, especially us. Because we're the ones that are here to enforce the law, and we got to make sure peace is kept. Because if we're not here, then peace is going to be all kind of chaos. BLET trains officers in a very hypervigilant way. Now, hypervigilance, when I say hypervigilant, I'm talking about stress-induced training that causes an officer to adopt default behaviors that they go to ensure that they can go home at the end of the day. So there's this fight, flight, freeze concept, right? And, you know, they've added on some additional stuff to this concept when happens when the brain hits a very stressful, overwhelmingly stressful situation. BLET training conditions that officer to take the action of eliminating the threat, okay? And the threat is always subject to interpretation and perception. So if you and I were an officer on the scene, and you were standing on the left side of the suspect, and I'm standing on the right side of the suspect, and I can see from my vantage point that that suspect has a gun on the right side of his belt. You can't see that from over there. I take action, I plug this guy, and then you don't shoot. It looks like I'm the guy that's got the issue. But I saw the threat that you couldn't see. Or my perception of the threat was based upon whatever my subjective truths are at that particular moment. I
think that most perception when it comes to black male suspect is that they're dangerous, and the reality is that is not always the case.
I agree.
But but that's the perception. So that hypervigilance, as soon as you see brown skin, right, is going to be extra than necessary.
Okay, so where do you think that perception comes from?
Oh Lord.
Oh Lord, Jesus has risen. Where does that perception come from?
It comes from society and the conditioning.
Oh, really? Conditioning from where?
Conditioning from media and the powers that be, because they put on what they want the world to see.
How about that? So, going back to what I was sharing with you about BLET training, the training doesn't specify who behaves in this way. The training suggests that if a suspect is non-compliant, follow me now, if a suspect is non-compliant, I'm telling you to stop, you're continuing to run or you're continuing to do whatever you're doing, and you're not listening to me, he's non-compliant. If I tell you to take your hands out your pocket and you don't do it, you're non-compliant. If I tell you to stop moving, you keep moving, you're non-compliant. Okay? You got that understanding? You understand? Okay, that's non-compliance. If a suspect conceals his hands, you can't shoot me with your mouth or your feet. You shoot me with your hands, okay? And if your hands are hidden or concealed in places where guns are known to be kept by research and by past incidents.
And even when my hands are up, because you as an officer says put your hands up, and I do that, and you still shoot, then what? What's the logistics? So, what's the logic there?
Okay, don't attack the messenger. I'm just giving you a message, okay? Listen, let me finish explaining my point. Okay, the hands are concealed, then that's considered a threat as well. Whether you put your hands in your pocket, in your waistline, wherever guns or weapons are known to be stored and held, it induces the hypervigilance because officers train in that way. And so so the first thing they'll tell you is, let me see your hands. That's typically what you'll hear an officer say.
Right. When I start to put my hands out, and one of my hands is holding a cell phone.
Correct.
Or a hammer,
right,
or a knife,
correct,
anything other than a gun,
you will get shot.
It don't matter because there's something in my hand and the officer on the other end believes it's a gun.
Because that's how police officers are trained. You're not catching what I'm saying to you. Officers are trained in a hypervigilant state. When you are in a hypervigilant state, you do not rationally think. It's not possible.
When they arrested the guy who shot them teenagers on Valentine's Day, did he have a gun in his hand?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
The guy who shot the kids in Parkland High School in Florida.
Okay, I don't even remember how he was arrested. They apprehended him without having to kill him. Right. Okay.
Right, and the guy who shot the kids in the church, the people in the church.
Yeah, right. Dylan something. Yeah, right. The Dylan kid.
He had a gun. They knew he had a gun. In both cases, they knew the suspect had a gun, right? Because the people are dead, yet those two individuals are still alive. Here it is somebody who we're not sure if he has a gun. Nobody's dead, yet he's the one who ends up dead.
So the fear-based training that officers go through in BLET training, again, when the brain is put into this shock moment or this shock area where the stress level of the incident or the situation supersedes rational thought, it's all about instinctive, impulsive survival behaviors.
Okay, and when you hear...
Don't cut me off. Default behavior, okay? The conditioning of BLET training, it instructs officers on a default behavior, which is to eliminate the threat so that they're not taken out. There have been many incidents through shoot or don't shoot videos, videos where in BLET training they show officers have had their lives taken because they were lax on a search or lax with their approach or whatever it may have been. An unsuspecting murderer ends up shooting and killing the officer. So you have videos like this that play constantly in the officer's mind about how vigilant they need to be when it comes to, I'm going to make sure I go home at the end of the day. So if this suspect, going back to this particular case, if this guy who was shot unarmed was a part of this process where they were breaking windows and a helicopter found him and he ran into the backyard of the area where he was at and the officers chased him or surrounded him there and he didn't comply with their instructions, yeah, it's highly likely he's going to get shot, especially at nighttime.
20 times?
Again, we're talking, you're doing this from like an armchair, a relaxed armchair quarterback approach. But the reality is when you're involved in a life or death situation, time feels like an hour. 2 seconds feel like an hour. Time slows down. Everything. I can't explain
exactly. Is time slowing down, or is everything happening so fast that people are not being logical?
People who are in the heat of the moment with that extreme arousal under that stressful state, time. In fact, things look slower. Things. If I don't take action now, I may die. The fear-based concept that I believe is drilled during BLET training creates this state of mind that doesn't allow officers to rationally think. Anyone who's under heavy stress cannot rationally or logically think at that given moment while the precipitating event or the initiating event is taking place.
Okay. All right. And so in the situation with the high school, right, being shot up, was that not a chaotic situation where you're talking about a high school with thousands of children, okay, don't know who's safe, who's killed, whatever. That seemed like a very, very highly stressful situation, okay? The suspect's still alive. Ain't nobody take his ass out knowing that people were dying and dead.
Same thing happened down at the Post nightclub. That was a chaotic ass situation too, out in Orlando when they shot that gay club.
Yeah, where's that suspect at? I don't remember. I think
he's dead.
Yeah. Did they kill him or he killed himself?
I don't know. I don't remember. But this is the thing, though. You know, what's your stance or what's your perspective? Because I was former law enforcement, so I'm telling you how the training works, how it conditions the officer's mind to take action in the ways that officers are taking action against people who they believe are a threat. That the officer has to go home at the end of the day. So what don't you understand, or what do you have a grievance about? And I understand the whole white officer killing unarmed black men, but they're not the only ones getting shot down that are unarmed.
I understand that. So my issue is that I think once the suspect race is identified, that already hypervigilance is what's the word I'm looking for?
Makes them makes them the usual suspect.
Is the hypervigilance is heightened when you find out that person's skin is brown.
Okay, so let me tell you the other part, and you hit on it earlier because we had conversations about this, right? So if BLET doesn't label or attach these behaviors, reaching hands, someone who runs from the scene, someone who's non-compliant with the officer, someone who hides their hands or doesn't listen, whatever it may be, if BLET doesn't attach that behavior to any specific race, religion, creed, whatever it may be, where do the officers get this information from? You said media. I tend to agree. So when we think about things like trap music, and I made a video about this, Jazz, a couple last year sometime, but when we think about trap music and how we see a lot of young black males holding guns and being reckless and lawless in these videos, whether these guns are real or fake.
So are the officers watching these videos?
Who doesn't watch them?
I don't.
You've seen them, though. You've seen them. You've seen them. So don't front like, this ain't a reality that nobody understands or recognizes.
Right. I've seen them. But I'm also 41 years old. And I'm assume that your officers are in their mid-30s, 40s, whatever. So at that age level, who's really sitting around watching a bunch of young kids make these ignorant videos? Okay, that's a different age group. So no, I'm not watching. Yes, I know they exist.
Hold on, check this out.
But I'm not watching that stuff at this day and age.
I think you're not incorporating the understanding associated with human development. And this is where my clinical background comes in, okay? Because you take a child, and I was a victim of it, you take a child who doesn't have the proper guidance by an adult. Where do they get their information from on how to become a man or how to be cool or how to
the streets.
From the streets. And where do you think the streets get this blueprint from? They get it from the videos. They get it from TV. Everybody wanted to be Al Capone, say hello to my little friend, and all that jazz when that movie came out. Everybody wanted to be their nicknames, something associated with the mob or something that was glorified as gangster on the television screen. You dig? So you got kids emulating the behaviors of the media that's portrayed to them in the media because they don't have any other adult guide to instruct them on how to do things, participate in behaviors that will lead to success. But instead, these behaviors play right into the hands of what law enforcement officers enforce. So if you got a kid, I'm in love with the cocoa, and other cats talking about, yo, I'm going to bust you and shoot you in your head to make you bleed red and all this other jazz, violence, guns, and all this jazz, then yeah, if an officer who's never been around black folk sees this, oh, is this what the younger generation is all about? So if I see somebody that look like this cat in the video with gold fronts, dreads, sagging pants, whatever it may be, bandanas, tattoos, and however the image is presented in the media, then there's going to be this connection that this might be the usual suspect, because the last time I saw something that looked like this was in a video associated with drugs, gangs, getting money, and hurting people.
But that's an ignorant ass officer.
Check this out. Then you know what? A great bulk of the world is ignorant, man, because even some of our own people will see people who look like that and cross the damn street. So guess what? We're talking about the whole damn near the whole entire world that's conditioned by this bullshit, including the kids that ain't even about that life, but they do it because they want to feel safe, they want to be cool, or whatever it may be. They emulate that image, thinking that it's going to keep them safe in their environment, when all it does is it creates a bullseye on their damn back.
Okay, so who's at fault? The child that's being raised by the television that don't know no better? Is his fault?
No. Whose fault is it then? That's a great question. The irresponsibility of the fucking media. That's who's at fault. And it takes parents like you and me have to correct or educate our kids to not fall victim to the bullshit. And if a child doesn't have parents like you and I to educate them and sit down and have family meetings and sit down and discuss this shit, then that child is going to go out there and emulate to the best of his ability or her ability, what they think will keep them safe in their environment.
Right, but it's not just the child. It's not just the child, okay? So even though that stuff is all over the internet and television or whatever,
yeah,
as an adult, Okay, you should be smart enough and have the self-awareness to know that I cannot automatically assume this child is like this because of what I've seen on TV or whatever.
Time out. I just told you about that officer who didn't automatically assume that the guy who's on a cell phone and had his hands in his pocket was armed. I'm assuming he didn't assume that the guy was armed. Yet he was telling him, let me see your hands. The guy pulls out the gun and shoots at the damn officer, damn near killed him. Okay? So the argument you're spewing right now doesn't make sense as it relates to the totality of the picture when one is hypervigilant in a very stressful state. You cannot logically think when you're stressed out. When it's a life or death situation, you cannot logically think. You go to default, which is fight, flight, or freeze. Officers are trained to stop the threat. It's always going to be fight and stop the threat. What does it look like for an officer to retreat or run like hell if some chaotic shit's going down and they're the ones that are supposed to be responsible for stopping the chaotic shit?
And we saw that with the Parkland High School shooting. The school resource officer retreated.
Guess what? Before he was a school resource officer, you know what he was? You want to know something?
What?
He was a damn human being. I don't even want to ask you the question. If you heard gunshots going off right now, what would you do? That's it. That's all I need. That's the only answer I want to fucking hear right now. Exactly. Don't answer. You just answer it, okay?
If I hear gunshots going off,
what would you do?
I'm going to duck, right?
No doubt.
But
Exactly.
if I'm trained, if I'm this trained professional, because I've been trained, I have my license, I went through all the necessary training, I have the permission or the authority to have my gun, okay? So I'm expected to step up to the plate when it's necessary.
Of course.
And apparently this officer did not do that. And I don't know the whole situation behind that, right?
Parkland's done. The guy's in jail, okay?
He's alive, though. And 17 other children are dead.
You felt better if he would have died? Is that what I'm saying?
No, would I have felt better? I'm going to let God deal with him. But what I'm speaking to is that he killed 17 people, yet he was arrested and put in jail, and he's still alive. And here's a man who maybe, and even if he was doing something criminal, he was breaking into cars or breaking a window or whatever, okay? Nobody died but him.
Right.
And so what I'm speaking to is that there's an inconsistency here where if, depending on the level of your melanin, okay, will determine on whether you live or die. And it has nothing to do with how bad your crime is, because we have seen crimes that have been committed really bad, yet the people are still alive.
So you know what I hear you saying? I hear you saying you have a problem with the process, right? On how certain officers will be quick to shoot and kill, and apparently some are not as quick to shoot and kill, okay? And there are a variety of reasons for that. You know, whether it's that officer's personal humanistic makeup, whether it's got something to do with policies and procedures in their agency, or the laws or the concerns for like how this shit's gonna look in the media afterwards. That makes some folks trigger shy, whatever it may be. Here's the thing. I just had a thought. You made me dang gonna lose it going into all of that. Officers, again, are trained to eliminate the threat. And it's up to that officer who decides to pull the trigger or use force to be able to articulate what he reasonably believed led him to make that decision.
Okay, Kareem.
Typically, I was in fear of my life.
Yeah, that's the one.
You said that there was an iPhone or something involved. The guy had a phone or something like that. He had something in his hand. Now, imagine this now in my hand, okay? Now, I can go get my firearm and hold it up and we're talking about low light, and this can look like a gun. Wherever I got it, whatever, it's something in my hand. If I can't see it from the range wherever I'm at and it's in the dark, you damn right, I might bust shots too. That's how officers are trained.
Right. So if officers are trained to eliminate the threat, then when they came upon the high school and found the guy or knew the guy who had just killed all, why didn't they eliminate his ass? Okay. When they found,
at the time they found,
no. He was a threat because lives have been lost. So yes, he's a threat. Period. Okay, so don't sit here and tell me officers are trained to eliminate the threat when they come upon the threat and actually know what the threat has caused, and still they get to just put handcuffs on the man and he's still alive. Okay,
you know this country.
So there needs that statement right there. You need to change it.
This country has a justice system where
that is not just. We already know that. So now what? Now what?
All I'm saying is that law enforcement officers are trained, as they call it, to stop the threat. Stopping the threat.
Well, they always have not stopped the threat.
Stopping the threat sometimes means that you're in the process, the life is going to be taken. Okay? It's the same as stopping the threat. Whether I stop you, I shoot you and you stop and you live, great. If I shoot you and you stop and you die, it's a part of the it comes with the territory. Okay? I think the biggest issue that the community has with law enforcement is that they don't totally understand how the training works. And the training operates off of a hypervigilant state. An officer is hypervigilant during the time that they have to make a quick second decision on how to resolve this uncontrollable situation. A situation where the suspect is perhaps not complying, made a movement, fled, or something is just not consistent with that officer being able to establish control over the circumstance, will cause that suspect to be shot. And then it's going to be up to the officer to articulate why they assumed or why they believed it was necessary to shoot them. And if it sounds reasonable, that officer is going to walk, he's going to get off. So that's why so many unarmed black men have officers who have shot them, and whether they shot them and they lived or shot them and killed them, have gotten off because they've proven that the reason they did it, based upon their fear, I was in fear of my life, that's got to go with it, right? I had to take action, or I thought I was going to die, or someone else was going to die.
And what constitutes fear? The level of brownness that you have? Is that it?
You know what? Guess what? As shallow and as unconscious as our world is today, I would say that contributes. If you're black, based upon the way the media has portrayed you, you're probably a damn threat.
So it sounds.
If you're Muslim, now you're radical, and you might have a friggin' bomb. Again, the media creates these narratives that all of us are forced to be privy to, and we're either going to be conscious enough or unconscious enough to either participate or disassociate from the narratives.
Okay, so in this training that law enforcement gets.
Why you gotta say it like that though?
That's the way I want to say it.
You know what?
In this training that law enforcement gets, is there anything in there that's training them on culturalism and stuff like that to talk about these subconscious conditionings and biases that we all have?
Of course, man. They got implicit bias training and wellness training and all kind of shit to multicultural training to multicultural sensitivity. And
okay, is that like mandatory, or when do they get that? Is that in the beginning of the training, during, after, once a year? Because I think that if it is frequently available or mandatory, then maybe it won't be, I fear for my life because his skin was browner than a paper bag or something like that. And of course they're not going to say that. They're going to articulate something else. But, maybe we can reduce all of these unnecessary fatalities.
So they do have training like that. I don't know if it's incorporated in their basic law enforcement training, but they do have mandated training. And my thing is, you've been here since the beginning of time with me as it relates to the shit that I've been through, right? So, going through the lawsuits I went through for using excessive force, and then, the indictments and shit for going through what I went through, I developed my own training to address that shit. Okay. Officers who are suffering in silence with the burnout and these preconceived biases that they may carry into the profession. We're human. We were human before we became police officers. And there's like for some folks, whether they went to the military or they grew up in a neighborhood where there was a lot of traumatic events, have PTSD, and they bring that shit into law enforcement and they cloak this unaddressed issue behind the uniform and the roles that they play.
And how do they? Okay, so what if somebody doesn't even think or believe that they have any of this implicit biases or prejudices or anything like that? How do you? I mean, if somebody thinks, "Oh, I'm fine," or I'm not racist, or I'm just doing my job.
Yeah.
Then they won't think they have an issue. So how do you get to somebody like that?
That's a good point. And I don't think there's any training that addresses that, man, because again, the training that I provide to officers is to address those who are suffering in silence.
Right, but you have to first identify that you are suffering in silence.
Correct.
And if somebody's not identifying that, right, that's the officer who's a problem.
Of course. He's a pressure cooker waiting to bust. Yeah.
Right. So what I'm saying is probably the majority, I don't know, but there's a fair share of officers who probably believe they don't have an issue.
That's correct.
So
it's scary to have an issue.
Right, and I can understand that. So what is in place that says nothing. You need to get some training regardless of whether you believe it or not? Because maybe once you're sitting in that class, then you will have an aha moment like, okay, yeah, I may have been, this way or done that before. Right. And maybe I need to check myself.
To be honest with you, I don't think everything is reactive instead of proactive is what I believe. There's nothing proactive about addressing an officer's deterioration of mental health over time. So an officer may come into the profession feeling wonderful and great and be healthy according to the psychological assessments that they take, or he may come in fucked up and not be mentally well, but provide socially desirable answers to pass the psychological assessment, and then he becomes a cop and wears a uniform. But what happens over time is that all the incidents of things that trigger them, that trigger their emotional injuries or trigger past traumatic events, whatever it may be, they layer, and the next thing you know, you got a liability on your hands, or an officer who looks for opportunities to use force or fuck somebody's ass up to let off that steam.
Right. So,
and he did it while performing his duties. He was just doing his job.
So what's the solution? Wrap it up.
That's why I, created my program. That's why I created my self-help program. The thing about it is that because we're talking about officers who are now cloaked behind the uniform and the performance of their duties, who are struggling with these issues and who are afraid to come forward because it qualifies them as being unfit for duty, it's hard for me to get into agencies to introduce this shit. But where there's a will, there's a way. And it's going to eventually have to happen. And so, I empathize with every family that has ever lost someone to gun violence, period. Whether it's thugs in the streets or police on a suspect or whatever it may be, police officers getting shot by suspects, whatever it may be. I empathize. No one prepares for that. It's not like someone has a disease and they're slowly deteriorating towards death. It's not something you can expect or prepare for. And so I empathize greatly with folks who've lost a loved one. But I think the real issue, I don't think we're focusing on the right issues. I think the right issue is to address the training. Now, an officer's training is designed to keep them alive. But what the training is missing is the complement of counseling to be able to help that officer debrief or to repackage that perspective of hypervigilance, that if someone is going in their pocket after I told them, ask them, where's your license registration? And they do this to go into their pocket. I have to have the wherewithal to be on my P's and Q's, but not jump to the conclusion that they're going for a gun when they're in fact reaching for their ID. And so counseling can help officers package that hypervigilance in a way that doesn't say everybody who conceals their hands is fucking a suspect and they need to be shot or they're going for a gun. And so I think counseling is something that needs to be mandated and incorporated in law enforcement to help offset the fucked up hypervigilance that I believe induces the onset of burnout in every officer's career. The only thing that separates officers in certain circumstances such as that is whether or not they have the right support system around them, whether they're married or they have someone that they can talk to outside of work to offload that stuff. But if they don't have anybody, man, they are a walking time bomb.
Support groups and other colleagues.
If they feel safe enough to do that, because again, it's the agency versus the officer in some cases.
Well, that could be with any profession, but I get it.
Yeah.
We done?
Are you done?
I ain't never done, but we can be done today.
Let me finish my dang on big ass bowl of salad, and yo, appreciate you recording.